Hamjambo. Thank you very much, and thank Chief Justice and everyone. I had not expected to give any remarks today, so I simply will say thank you very much for the invitation. Congratulations to obviously all the new leaders of the Editors Guild. And just emphasize that freedom of the media for the United States is certainly critically important, and I think it is for democratic countries all over the world. And it is truly essential, I think, to have rule of law, to have a strong constitutional order. So I certainly welcome all that's been done here in Kenya, starting with your excellent 2010 Constitution, to help ensure and guarantee the rights that are enshrined in that Constitution. I very much look forward to hearing what the Chief Justice has to say, and I look forward to seeing strong freedom of the media protection in Kenya. It really is critically important to maintaining the democracy which you have built. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. May I now take this chance to call upon Commissioner George Morara, the Vice Chair of the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, to come and make his remarks.
The Chief Justice of the Republic of Kenya and the President of the Supreme Court of Kenya, the Honorable Justice David Maraga, the Chairman of the Editors Guild,
All right, and of course we'll be heading back there to the inaugural Kenya Editors Guild luncheon. The chief guest definitely being Chief Justice David Maraga. So once he begins his address, we'll be crossing there live to just see what he will say in that particular address to the editors in the Kenyan media currently. Now, the Kenya County Government Workers Union has proposed a merger of the two LAP Trust and LAP Fund schemes under one corporate administration. The move is set to ensure the schemes will not collapse any scheme into another. The union urged for the withdrawal of all bills from Parliament for stakeholders to engage. The union was also apprehensive of the bills put in both houses of the Senate, saying they seek to kill sister scheme funds.
RBA iliundwa 1997, haikujumulisha. Ministry of Finance ilikuwa tangu 1963, haikujumulisha. Fund mbili yote inakaa kando, inaendelea kushindana na kushindana na kushindana na kupoteza pesa zetu. Kweli au uongo? Tunafanya campaign. Mimi mwenyewe nilikuwa CEO ya LAP Fund. Tulikuwa nafanya campaign kwa mamayors, kwa nani, between workers, navuta member huko, napeleka huko, tuna spend 70-80 million a year katika hali ya kushindana. LAP Fund natumia 80 million, LAP Trust natumia 100 million, that is close to 200 million pesa zetu ambaye ingeongeza ile manufaa ungepata wakati una retire. Wakati walianza kushindwa kulipa pesa watu wa local authorities, hakuna mtu anawauliza. Leo Nairobi hii ina 16 billion pesa haikulipo.
Operations halted along Namanga border were halted along Namanga border after a clearance agent and a customs officer were arrested for delays in clearing. It was alleged that it was not their particular crate, and the Kenya International Freight and Warehousing Association National Chairman William Ojonyo has blamed the Kenya Revenue Authority workers over that delay. Fathia Mohamed Nur now reports.
Customs officers on Namanga border stalled operations after one of their clearing agents was arrested and taken to court on claims of delayed clearance. However, the Kenya International Freight and Warehousing Association National Chairman William Ojonyo has pushed the blame on the investigation and enforcement departments and ISO at KRA.
What has come out clearly today is that there are other agencies from Kenya Revenue Authority who are working in isolation, and in my view, these are the people, these are the departments that are causing delays that eventually bring tension like what we have had today. Of importance is the fact that these officers and the clearing agent were apprehended for a mistake that was not theirs. I have confirmed that, in fact, everything had been done by the agent. All the uploading had been done, and DPC had deliberately or otherwise delayed to pass that entry.
Ojonyo, who accused authorities of intimidation, has also stated that the clearance agents at the border will only resume if facilitation of trade is done by both the private and government agents.
We have agreed that they are going back to work on one condition, that they will not be intimidated. They are going back to work in one condition, that facilitation of trade will be something that will be done by both the private sector and the government agencies.
Namanga border sits between Kenya and Tanzania. It is one of the beneficiaries of modern one-stop border posts opened by the Kenyan government earlier this year. But the current challenges only confirm that the border infrastructure uplift is not enough to improve operations. Cooperation of border agency is equally crucial. Fathiya Mohammed Noor, KTN News.
I want us now to take it back to the Kenyan Editors Guild luncheon, the inaugural session that is currently ongoing. The chief guest is Chief Justice David Maraga, who is expected to speak any minute now. Let's go over there live and listen in.
Early years in school seems not to conform to the current practice. Sometimes it appears to me that we are on autopilot, and funny enough, we find ourselves in front of our TV sets watching news. Now, despite the negativity and general bashing about the quality of media reporting, which I'll talk about shortly, we are still looking for answers about our democracy and ways to strengthen constitutionalism from the reports that come from the news. So my second point this afternoon is that the news industry is still relevant to all of us in this country. Perhaps we should be bolder and challenge the lazy assumptions frequently made by politicians, public figures, some newspaper owners, and even colleagues that all journalists operate to predetermined agendas, and that some are congenitally compromised and incapable of objectivity. Yes, we might find that journalists sometimes get it wrong, but the relevance and significance of the editorial output is extremely high in the most trying situations where, as a society, we do operate in a distorted ethical framework, yet we expect the news stories to reflect the opposite. For us to effect change in this society, we have therefore to be agile and think strategically about sweeping changes in our society. And in this regard, I would like to point out two trends that perhaps the Editors Guild should pay close attention to. First, we are currently in the midst of a never-ending political succession discourse. We know that election campaigns and such coverage plays an important role in the democratic process. Yet, when the votes are counted and the electoral circus tents are taken down, immediately the discourse shifts to the next election. What are we doing in terms of our editorial priorities? I often hear the statement that the media should play the role of opposition. But that assumes that with an opposition, the media will then take leave until there is no opposition. Really? Does that mean that media is merely a political substitute that will be brought to the field only when injury has taken place? I don't think so. Let me at this point state that bold journalism, and I say this, no pun intended to the Standard Media Group, should be a constant, whether there is a political opposition or not. No one and no political season should be immune to journalistic inquiry. Second, as we strive to holding accountable our democratic institutions and constitutional offices, we have a bigger challenge in applying the same standards in our newsrooms. For a long time, labor practices in newsrooms have not or do not reflect the best practice or lend legitimacy to what the media demands of other sectors. Remuneration of journalists, standards of promotion, and award of career development opportunities and fairness in disciplinary matters are not clearly stated in internal policies, and sadly, editors are not providing the necessary transparency to correct some of these matters. On one hand, editorial budgets are dwindling, and perhaps advertising revenues are unpredictable. However, the news industry is not the only sector experiencing the turbulence. You can ask me as a Constitutional Commission, we know that. But we must all hold tight in our various moments of turbulence and remain true to our ethical and professional standards. There are, of course, opportunities within to fill resources void, but even as we do this, let us also remember that commentary journalism cannot replace independent coverage, which is based on researched, sourced, and presented to a professional standard. If we demand privileges like access to information, the right to protect confidential sources, the right to self-regulate, it seems to me we also need to accept the responsibilities which go with that position. Third, I saw some time back the National Union of Journalists in the UK launching the so-called Stand Up for Journalism campaign. That is an important reminder that in the quest for cost-cutting, we cannot leave open newsrooms to experts, analysts, and commentators to set and control the newsroom agenda. If we do this, we risk the danger of subcontracting objectivity to those who have no business understanding, those who have no business or understanding of what public interest entails. I want to assure you that I've appeared in some of those panels. I'm not one of those who understand what public interest entails. We have a duty for editorial diversity, but not to the extent that our audience lacks the journalistic product in its untainted form. This means we need to provide adequate editorial resources so that journalists can do what is rightly expected of them. It means paying journalists a decent wage. It means staffing our newsrooms. It means an end to the abuse of interns and the use of experts to fill gaps. Let me repeat that. If television programs, radio bulletins, newspapers, and online services are to be relevant, we need a diverse media. However, the solution does not lie in cheap labor or inadequately staffed newsrooms. I'm about to finish, bear with me. Some of these challenges will of course happen when we have done a review to the existing regulation and legislation, especially establishing a broadcasting policy which recognizes the vital importance of the role of media houses across all platforms. Before that happens, however, we need within the industry to live up to the commitment of enabling journalism not only to survive, but to thrive. As a commission, I want to conclude by paraphrasing what Martin Luther King said. We believe that a violation of human rights for any sector, and that includes the media, is a violation of rights for all sectors. And also allow me to conclude with another remark from Malcolm X, which says, the media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and the guilty innocent because they control the minds of the masses. But I'm happy with the Kenyan media because, yes, we do play the role of shaping public opinion, but we do so in a manner that makes the guilty guilty and the innocent innocent. As a commission, we're humbled to be invited to be part of this luncheon today. We'll continue monitoring the work of journalism and the media sector in Kenya, and we'll walk with you all the steps and the ultimate journey of realizing the enjoyment of fundamental rights and freedoms for all, and that includes the rights and freedoms of the media houses. Asanteni sana.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Maraga. And ladies and gentlemen, it's now my pleasure to invite the Chief Justice of the Republic of Kenya and President of the Supreme Court, Honorable David Maraga, to come and address the gathering.
The American Ambassador, Your Excellency, Mr. Godek, representative of the Danish Embassy, the Chairman of the Kenyan Editors Guild, Mr. Churchill Otieno, distinguished editors and journalists, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a great honor and a pleasure to be here with you to give this keynote address at this inaugural Kenya Editors Press Club luncheon. As an association whose founding and primary objective is to defend and promote media freedom and independence, I'm happy to learn that the Kenya Editors Guild has made a conscious and a collective choice to actively promote democracy and constitutionalism in our country. The institutional objectives of the Editors Guild, which include monitoring legislation and the policies on media freedom and independence, improving the quality of journalism through training and education, and the provision of a forum for networking and sharing between professionals in the media industry, among other objectives, render you a formidable organization for great change. Why do I say so? These specific objectives seek to enhance the role of the media in promoting and sustaining our developing constitutional democracy. Indeed, these objectives will not only make your association grow, but will also, if pursued single-mindedly, contribute to the promotion of the core principles of democracy, constitutionalism, and the rule of law in this country. Today, the theme of your theme, the media, constitutionalism, and democracy, what options for Kenya, is an important starting point in terms of reflection on the independence of the media and the link to concepts of democracy and constitutionalism. In a free and growing democracy such as ours, the media plays an important watchdog role on behalf of the people and thus contributes to core constitutional concepts of transparency and accountability. To explain this further, the concept of constitutionalism binds the state organs to exercise power within constitutional confines and boundaries defined in the Constitution. Whenever an institution oversteps its mandate or acts contrary to the laid down order, it is the duty of the media to highlight those transgressions and inform the public. Furthermore, the media should lead in calling such institutions and persons to account in the manner in which they exercise powers bestowed upon them. In this way, the media transforms itself into an important tool for promotion of constitutionalism. Democracy, constitutionalism, and the media freedom are inextricably intertwined concepts. Indeed, one of the critical yardsticks of evaluating an effective or a struggling democracy is the presence or absence of a vibrant media that can hold the wielders of power to account. In situations where the media is silenced or controlled, it is highly unlikely that such a system can claim to have political and constitutional legitimacy. The concept of democracy generally requires the government or people in positions of public decision-making to reflect on the general will, to reflect the general will of the people. It is the duty of the media to report on the incongruence between the wishes of the people and the actions of the leaders. Thomas Jefferson, one of America's founding fathers and the third president of the United States, illustrated this clearly when he once stated, and I quote, "The basis of our governments being the opinion of people, the very first object should be to keep that right. And where it is left to me to decide whether we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I should not hesitate a moment to prefer the latter. But I should mean that every man should receive those newspapers and be capable of reading them," end of quote. Indeed, the experience that journalists go through in carrying out their work demonstrates the important role that the media plays to augment democracy. In Kenya and beyond, journalists and reporters risk their lives to bring to us stories that usually assist us to change our worldview and bring positive change to the world. For instance, International Journalists Federation report of 2017, which provides an annual report of the risks that journalists take in the discharge of their mandate, reported that 82 journalists and media staff were killed in 2017 in the course of duty. To quote the report, risks range from, and I quote, opposition to the media as a crucial pillar in democracy in certain parts of Africa, to the failure of holding accountable those who kill journalists in some European countries, to the reign of terror by organized crime in Latin America, terror attacks in Asia Pacific and the Middle East and Arab world, and the frontline violence in the latter, end of quote. The report also mentions an instance where HIV Safety Fund was used to provide financial support to help relocate a Kenyan journalist to a safe location after the journalist received death threats over some articles he had wanted to publish. These reports are not exaggerated or far removed from reality. One need not go very far back in our relatively short history to understand and appreciate the importance of media freedom and independence. In the past, Kenyan journalists have faced harassment, intimidation, and even assaults as they go about their work. Some have suffered personal harm and even paid the ultimate price in the course of their duty. I have in mind journalists like Has Maina, soundman Anton Macharia, Dan Eldon, who were killed in Somalia in the line of their duty. I also have in mind Mr. Wallace Gichere, who suffered terminal paralysis in 1991 after fall from a 3-story building during the police crackdown on perceived distance of the KANU government. Indeed, while the narratives about the struggle for democratic and political reforms in this country exalt the role of opposition politicians, church leaders, and civil society organizations, the media, and specifically persons who courageously reported on these stories are not given equal prominence in the mainstream discourses on constitutional and political reforms. Indeed, the media played an important role in highlighting and informing the country about such events as the infamous ethnic clashes and the stories of ethnic cleansing during the 1992, 1997, and 2007 violent clashes. The media thus contributed to awareness and later sacrifices that the country undertook in order to ensure peace and political stability. The example of Goles Gachire, which I have just mentioned, comes to point on this. As a result of the experience during the one-party state and the pre-2010 patterns of abuse of media freedom, Kenyans sought to entrench media freedom in the 2010 Constitution. Indeed, during the constitutional review process, one of the views that Kenyans expressed to the Constitution of Kenya Review Commission was to provide for the protection of journalists and the press freedoms in general. The Constitution provides for general and particular provisions whose broad goal is to promote the freedom and the independence of the media. First, the Constitution guarantees under Article 32 of the Constitution the freedom of conscience, religion, belief, and opinion. This provision specifically protects the right of a person to hold an opinion or a belief. The Constitution also guarantees freedom of expression. In the relevant parts, the right entails the freedom to seek, receive, or impart information or ideas, among other guarantees. This right is not limited to wrongs such as propaganda or war, incitement or violence, or hate speech. I'm sorry, I will read that again. This right is limited to wrongs such as propaganda or war, incitement or violence, or hate speech. Secondly, freedom of the media is guaranteed under Article 34(1) of the Constitution and extends to freedom and the independence of electronic print and all other types of media. Specifically, the state is prohibited from exercising control over or interference with any person engaged in broadcasting, the production or circulation of any publication, or a dissemination of information by any medium. The state is also prohibited from penalizing any person for any opinion or a view or a content of any broadcast, publication, or a dissemination. Licensing and regulatory procedures should not be used as a form of control of the media. Instead, they should be limited to necessary regulation of the airwaves. The Constitution further provides that state-owned media should be free to determine editorial content, should be impartial, and afford fair opportunity for the representation of divergent views or dissenting opinions. In order to guarantee media independence, Parliament has established through legislation the Media Council of Kenya to set media standards and regulate media and compliance with the standards. Finally, the Constitution provides for and guarantees every citizen the right to access information. These provisions collectively entail a critical bundle of rights that are necessary in order to have a vibrant media that is in consonance with the broader constitutional system that we have set for ourselves as Kenyans. More importantly, they are not mere aspirations that were picked from the air, but provisions that are informed by challenges and lived realities of Kenyans who decided to entrench media freedom in the Constitution. As I observed earlier, the media contributes to an informed citizenry, and in turn, an informed citizenry is able to play its role in a constitutional democracy. The recognition and entrenchment of the media freedom and independence thus provides an independent basis for consolidating our constitutional democracy. I wish to add here, ladies and gentlemen, that these guarantees in the Constitution sometimes are misunderstood to mean that they are rights just given to the media. In my own opinion, these are rights which benefit more the public than the media houses. However, as we sit here today, we need to ask ourselves important questions regarding media freedom and independence. How have we fared in terms of freedom of protection of independence of the media? Do the very progressive provisions in our Constitution mean anything to our hard-working women and men in the media industry? You ladies and gentlemen here included? In other words, have we translated the constitutional protection of media freedoms into reality in this country? The second and equally important question is whether or not the available media freedom has facilitated our growing democracy to develop. Kenyans have expressed their common desire through the Constitution about where the country should be headed. As an agent of public information, the media has a critical role of facilitating Kenyans to move in the desired direction. Indeed, you should always remember that your work as media professionals is more than anything a service to the Kenyan people. And that's why I said the rights that have been entrenched in the Constitution are more for the Kenyan people than even the journalists. Thus, the specific question is whether the media freedoms, with the attendant challenges, have facilitated Kenya and Kenyans to move in the desired direction. This is an important point to ponder and reflect on as the people in charge of editorial content. The role of shepherding constitutionalism and democracy is, however, not the media's alone, but is a shared one, including the courts of law. As you are aware, the judiciary is bestowed with the sacrosanct duty of shepherding and guiding our constitutionalism. This, of necessity, entails the safeguard and the protection of all rights and freedoms in the Bill of Rights, including media freedom and independence. The judiciary enforces these rights and freedoms in matters that have been brought to the courts of law. There are a number of cases, recent and past, where the judiciary has stood for the media freedom and independence. You will recall in December 2015, the High Court struck down a number of legislative amendments which targeted the security-related laws The amendments were in a way found to be too general, and the court overruled and struck them down. In another case, the petitioner, the case of Robert Alai versus the Attorney General, the petitioner challenged the constitutionality of Section 132 of the Penal Code, which prescribes the offense of undermining authority of a public officer. The court declared that provision unconstitutional on the grounds that it undermines freedom of expression. In the other case of Geoffrey Andare versus the Attorney General, the High Court declared Section 29 of the Information and Communications Act unconstitutional. The section had criminalized the sending by means of a licensed telecommunication system messages that are grossly offensive or menacingly or of a men.
Of course, that is Chief Justice David Maraga, the chief guest at the Kenya Editors Guild luncheon, the inaugural function, which is today.